Okay, good morning. Uh,
Good morning, everybody.
Thank you for being here. We are two researchers. I am Irene Martins from CIIMAR in the University of Porto, and I have my good friend and colleague here.
I'm Ana Colas from the University of the Azores.
And we are going to tell you something about using numerical tools to support environmental risk assessment in the ocean. Okay. So, environmental risk assessment is a process that aims to identify, analyze, and evaluate potential environmental risks that may be a result of human activities that then will cause harm not only to human populations but also to the environment. In a schematic way, this process of ERA, or environmental risk assessment, can be described as you can see here. It has several steps, from planning and scoping, then to set up the problem formulation, protection goals. The risk analysis, which implies that we need to characterize the exposure and the effect, and then to have a good risk characterization. Then it's also important to have good risk communication, and finally, maybe the most important goal is to have a risk management. So we think that in several phases of this process, numerical models can be very useful. And why do we think this? Well, it's due to the characteristics of numerical models. They describe processes, they incorporate several stressors at the same time, which is paramount these days because we have several stressors acting at the same time in our natural systems. Also, numerical models, they are dynamic, as opposed to statistical models, which are more like a picture of the system, because we collect data, and then we treat data, but they only tell us how the system was for that moment. Numerical models, they are more like a movie. If you want to make a comparison, it's more like a movie, because due to their incorporation of numerical equations and dependency with time, they can predict the ecosystem composition and functioning over time, giving us like a picture look of the system. So we think this is ideal if we want to test what-if scenarios that can support decision making. And of course, this is paramount for environmental risk assessment. So that's why we think these tools are so useful for this process. So how are we applying this process then? We are following this approach in two projects that we carry on at CIIMAR. One is model risk. Model risk is also developed in cooperation with Oceanos from the University of the Azores. And we use this to establish ERA for hazard and noxious substance spills. What are hazard and noxious substances, or HNS, more easy way? They are any substance other than oil that, if introduced in the marine environment, is possible to cause harm not only to human populations but also to marine life in general. And it's important to develop these studies because, as you can see here, we have the idea to think that maritime transport is mostly about oil, but in fact there are a lot of other products and chemicals being transported. As you can see in this graph here, okay, you have, besides oil, you have a lot of other chemicals being transported, and these are called the HNS. And because maritime transport is already very intense, you can see here the maritime routes and the intensity that they have, and it's expected to increase in the future. And because there is a very few knowledge about what these HNSs cause in marine ecosystems, that's why we are studying this problematic. We are also focusing in the Azores ecosystems because, as you can see here, a lot of maritime routes pass in the Azores area. So it's important to try to assess what will happen if there is a HNS spill what will happen to the iconic ecosystems from the Azores, which my colleague will present you a little bit further. Okay, then we have also other projects, deep risk projects. In this case, besides CIIMAR and Oceanos, we also have the participation of IPMA, where here we try to develop ERA, but in this case for deep sea mining and climate change. Why deep sea mining? Well, deep sea mining is an economically appealing solution nowadays because the resources of metals and the raw materials in terrestrial places is being overexploited, so in some cases already exhausted. So it means that probably this industry is going to turn to the sea, to deep sea extraction of some raw materials. The most immediate consequence for deep sea habitats is the presence of sediment plumes. Okay, as you can see here in this kind of graphical representation. But not only, we will have a lot of other consequences to deep sea ecosystems if deep sea mining is going to take place. For instance, for the seamounts, because they are expected to have a lot of cobalt crusts, for deep sea hydrothermal vents, due to the polymetallic sulfides, they are likely to be ecosystems that may potentially be affected by deep sea mining. So that's why we are also doing this process of ERA for these two ecosystems, taking the Azores as an example because we have these two ecosystems in the Azores. So, as a resume, the general framework is that we have the stressors, okay, so in one case we have the HNS spills, in another case we have mining and also climate change. And then we are developing ocean circulation and dispersion models. Circulations models which are calibrated in the area of the ocean that we are working, which is the area of the Azores, and dispersion models that can simulate the dispersion of HNS in one case and of sediment plumes in the case of deep sea mining. And then the projections of these hydrodynamic models will be used to force food web and ecosystem models that we are developing for these two iconic ecosystems of the Azores. Okay, and that's how we aim to have some results which may be important to support decision making related to both HNS spills in case if they happen at sea or before deep sea mining takes place in a high amount, that we may have some kind of guidelines to support authorities and research in general about the development of these activities in the deep sea. Okay, and I will now pass the presentation to my colleague.
Thank you. Thank you, Irene. Well, the Azores are 9 islands in the middle of the Atlantic, and we are above the mid-oceanic ridge, and most of the oceanic environment that we have is deep sea. But what is deep sea? Deep sea is the largest biome on Earth. The oceans occupy 70% of the planet, but 90% of the oceans are deep sea. And they play a very, very important role because they absorb the excess of heat from the atmosphere. So all this volume is absorbing the heat. And also, it's a huge carbon sink for the excess of carbon dioxide. And if you look to the species that we have there, we have these amazing creatures that live in the water column and are so fragile. You have here pyrosomes, we have here squids, anemones, and lanternfishes, and these are really, really important because in the ocean they are the food for charismatic pelagic fauna like sperm whales, like birds, like dolphins, like turtles, but at the same time, they do migrations and they go to the bottom of the ocean, and they are also food for many other organisms, like we have here corals, sponges, large aggregations of sponges, rockfishes, and black corals, and also holoturians, squids, and many other organisms that are profiting from all of these organisms. And in the Azores, what do we have there in the bottom? Well, on this, the Azores is also, the Sea of the Azores is one of the largest aggregations of seamounts in the Atlantic. And on these seamounts, we have coral reefs and coral gardens, we have sponge aggregations, hydrothermal vents, abyssal plains. And on these habitats, these species, they are really, really vulnerable. And why? Because they grow really slowly, they mature very late, sometimes they mature at the age of our grandfathers and grandmothers, and they have a very, very low offspring. It means that they just give 1 or 2 babies. So these are really characteristics that make these species really, really vulnerable, and they live in the seamounts. On the other hand, in the deep sea hydrothermal vents, we have other type of species that just live there, and they cannot live anywhere else. They need all of these fluids, rich, hot fluids, full of gases like sulfide, like carbon dioxide, like methane, that will feed bacteria that are synthesizing organic matter from these chemical products, and they are the base of the food chain for all of these organisms. So it means that if we remove the hydrothermal vents, these organisms will disappear because they cannot live anywhere else. And here we have a scheme of a seamount. So what we have on a seamount? We have all the organisms that live in the seafloor, like the corals, the sponges, the anemones, the echinoderms, the fishes, but we also have all of these pelagic organisms that do migrations. And the charismatic fauna, like the turtles, the birds, etc., they are profiting from all of these organisms that are doing migrations. So the Azores is a hotspot for birds, for marine mammals, sea turtles, but it's because we have all of this productivity there. If we remove all of this, it means that all of this charismatic fauna will also start disappearing. We start not being a hotspot. And in the deep sea hydrothermal vents is the same. You can see here, this is a very special hydrothermal vent. The fluids, instead of being acidic, because the fluids in the deep sea hydrothermal vents have a pH of 3-4. They are more acidic than the lemon or the vinegar. And the fluids, they are at 320 degrees Celsius. And these fluids are full of heavy metals. And all of these organisms, they are really adapted to this environment, this really extreme, unique, and amazing environment. And when the fluid disappears, we start having these chimneys, these dead chimneys without fauna. But actually, it's not really without fauna, because all of those organisms that you see on the seamounts, like the sponges, the corals, they need substrate. And sometimes the larvae, they settle on these chimneys, and they are growing there. So when we have a coral or a sponge that is growing on a whole chimney, it means that they settled there when they were moving in the water column. And the deep sea, despite being far from our eyes, they really, really provide very important services to the planet. They are providing supporting services, because the nutrient cycle, the biologic pump, all the organisms that die in the water column, they will be arriving to the seafloor. And on the seafloor, they are going to be, the organic material is going to be degraded, and a lot of nutrient cycles. They are providing habitat for several organisms. they are creating the resilience. We have primary and secondary production in the deep sea, and we also have a huge amount of biodiversity, and biodiversity per se, it's a huge value. We need that biodiversity. And also the water circulation and exchange. And all of these supporting services are really important for the provisioning services. If you want to have fish in our tables, if you want to have energy, minerals, chemical and new pharmaceutical compounds, and nowadays everybody knows what it's a PCR. PCR, it's a technique, it's an enzymatic technique that the enzyme that is used, it was discovered from a bacteria from a deep sea hydrothermal vent. And this is really amazing because it was the only bacteria that managed that when we are sequencing something, we'll have a very, very low error. So there are new products that are existing in the deep sea organisms that are now being discovered. Also, there is a regulating services. As I told you in the beginning, the deep sea is really important for the climate regulation, absorbing the excess of heat, carbon sinking. If we don't have the deep sea, or if we are affecting the deep sea, what will happen is that all of this carbon that has been sinking for thousands and thousands of years might be coming again to the atmosphere. Also the waste absorption and detoxification. All the water column, a single drop of water in the sea have bacteria that are also detoxifying the environment. Recently there was a paper showing that there was bacteria on the deep sea that might degrade plastics. So really, there are really new organisms that are really important. And also the cultural services, recreation, the images. No one can be indifferent when they see these amazing images from the deep sea organisms and from the deep sea habitats. So in conclusion, the deep sea, it's part of our daily lives because it gives nutrients for the phytoplankton that produces the oxygen that we breathe. It gives nutrients that this phytoplankton then will feed the sardines that we love to eat in our plates. So these are really an important service. It puts food also in our table. It regulates the climate by absorbing the heat and sequestering the carbon dioxide and allowing the thermocline circulation, our giant thermostat. And again, puts food in our tables. So the deep sea, it's really, really important. And what we would love now is we are not as many to divide ourselves in groups, but I would love that each one of you will answer to 4 simple questions. Irene will give you...
I will give you some. I mean, if they want to gather in groups of 2 or 3, it's okay.
And these are the 4 questions.
It's just to have some interaction from the audience. Okay, I will give you, thank you so much. I will give you 2, maybe, because, okay, we would like, if you could answer this, the top 5 ecosystem services, the top 5 stressors, and then if you think numerical tools are helpful to preserve our oceans, and which are the most important characteristics that you would enumerate for the importance of numerical tools. Okay, I give you here this. Maybe you have to write on the chair. We didn't realize that time.
And if you are okay, we would love also to for statistical purposes, to know
the way you prefer.
Your age, your country.
Oh yeah, but that I will give after, because then okay. You. I think maybe you have to use a chair. Okay. I have something for you to write. Ok, thank you. Vou perguntar se esta senhora quer participar. Ai, é a Elizabeth, olá, tudo bem? Não se quer juntar ali com o CIIMAR? Não, mas sabe, venha aqui para o grupo de CIIMAR. Vem aqui a Elizabeth também, junta-se a vós. Esperem lá. Ah, pois, quer dizer, podem se dividir, se quiserem. É? Ah, mas eu estou a dar 2 a cada pessoa. Ah, olha, vocês ficam.
Se ficassem 2-2,
Pois, também dava.
podiam ficar 2-2, em vez de estar em
Ok.
4. Ok.
Está bem, então esperem que vão precisar de mais. Tomem. Olha, Ana Paula. Vou perguntar a estes senhores se eles querem participar. Querem participar? Do you want to participate in a... It's this question, so everyone knows this. The top 5 ecosystem services that the ocean provide, top 5 stressors. If you think numerical models are useful, maybe this other... You want to participate? Yes, please, because then we have more data for our...
I'm listening to you because she's not having...
pois é.
Ok.
Eu acho que... Pronto, não sei. Eu vou-vos dar... mas é que eu não sabia se vocês eram portugueses. Por isso que eu estava... Pois, se calhar vocês não me ouvem, né? Eu estou sempre com isto, pronto. Obrigada. E agora... Aqui, aquelas perguntas que estão ali.
Tens que ver as perguntas que é, qual é que achas que são os principais serviços ecossistémicos que o mar profundo pode providenciar? E, sim.
Ai.
Quais são os 5 stressores principais que acham que o mar profundo, portanto, as fontes hidrotermais, os montes marinhos têm? Portanto, nós estamos a focar na região dos Açores. E depois... Se achas que a modelação numérica, as ferramentas numéricas são importantes para preservar ou não os oceanos e quais são as características dos modelos que consideras mais... Ok, podes.
Vou pôr aqui agora aquela questão para os dados. Só que acho que depois eu pensava que tinha isso aqui, não tem.
A apresentação era muito mais pequena. Eu pensava que a apresentação e queria ter posto os videozinhos.
E depois estava para te dizer, porque agora já só temos, mas pronto.
Não, eu queria era falar mais.
Desculpa, Thor. Já estão? É? Não, vocês depois, supostamente vocês tinham que ir falar. Vá.
Vou só pôr a chave.
Esperem. Agora respondam-nos a isto, mas isto como é suposto ser anónimo, já estou a fazer assim. Que é só porque depois nós, para tratarmos, já temos assim. Toma, Susana. Estão a dar ali no início.
Pode-nos arranjar um microfone móvel?
Pois posso-vos pedir.
móvel.
Can I ask you this? It's so that we can have some data.
Irene,
É?
está aqui para depois as pessoas...
Ah, ok, boa. Ana, olha aí, Ana. Country, age, gender, job.
Ok.
Está na altura de partilhar, é? Pode não estar aqui.
Vê lá aí a
Não sei se estão por ordem.
age.
Não interessa. Muito bem.
É uma... Exato, não é que esteja...
O que é que acho que eu faço com as canetas? Onde está?
Está ali. Quanto tempo é que temos? Quanto?
10.
É? Não, não te ouço, agora ouço até. Can I then ask you to answer this?
Okay.
It's because so that we can, when we treat the date, country, age, gender and job. So, thank you. You can put a range if you prefer to put a range for the age.
Não funciona. Agora já. Ah, agora já está. Acho eu.
Está sempre nas.
Mas este área não faz mal, eu faço com este.
Beijinho?
Eu faço.
Posso-vos perguntar, isto é só para depois nós termos dados para podermos tratar os resultados. Obrigada.
Eu falo agora?
Agora posso falar. Ok, obrigada. Muito obrigada.
Oh, this is strange. Já me deve ter. Que tempo é que temos?
7 minutos. Temos aqui
Opa.
isto para as pessoas falarem.
Se calhar depois não vamos ter tempo para discutir os resultados. Mas achas que devemos começar a pedir para eles apresentarem os
Não,
grupos que
ainda não acabaram.
Eu sei, mas assim, depois. Alguns já acabaram. As pessoas perturbam, não é? Não perturbam porque podem não pôr os coisas.
Desculpem.
Hã?
Por
Desculpa.
isso mesmo. É importante ter a visão
Sim.
de quem não faz, de quem não é. Claro,
Sim, nós
obviamente.
queremos isso mesmo, que é para saber a percepção da. Ah, o quê? Eu acho que podíamos pedir a um grupo para começar a apresentar a Ana.
Thank you. You're finished? Not yet?
Question to finish.
Question to finish. Wow.
Ok, thank you. Thank you. Ah, vocês não têm? Não vos dei disto. Ah, mas quer tem que dar. Como é que é? Country. Age. Toma, Ana Paula. Ela já nos tirou imenso. Olha, não é melhor começares a pedir aos grupos para apresentarem, senão não, quer dizer, ou então we have 5 minutes left. Do you want to put headphones and present your results? You have to put on the mic. Tens já? Ah, tens este. Ok.
I don't want to rush you, but we just have 5 minutes, and then they will send us away. So, and we would love to hear and to see what you have done. So,
We are going to start with some group presenting.
okay.
Yes.
Okay, so for the top 5 ecosystem services provided, we have climate regulation, we have oxygen supply, carbon sequestration, food for people, and recreational services.
Okay.
And then the top 5 stressors, we attributed them all to human activity. So we have climate change, overfishing, exploration of minerals and petroleum, I don't know.
Resources.
Yeah. Pollution and plastics, which are the same thing, but plastics have now a different category in here, and acidification of the waters. And of course, the answer to question 3 is yes. And we think that this type of models can work as tools, provision tools, and they are a way to analyze great amounts of data that we otherwise would not be able to process, and they can work to support decision by policymakers.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much. We are taking these two. Sorry.
Yes.
So next group that wants to present, you can present.
Yeah. So for the services, we mentioned food, minerals, pharmaceutical products, carbon sequestration, and biodiversity.
Yes.
Then the stresses, we have pollution, and we have given examples like agricultural imports, kind of pesticides, nutrient loads. Number 2, we have overexploitation. Number 3, we have coastal agglomeration or settlements, human settlements.
Yeah.
And then number 4, we have introduction of invasive species. And then number 3 is a metal kind of.
Some metals that would throw into the ocean, like for example a wind turbine that would like part of the metal that would just float to the sea, and I guess it would have some negative consequences that nobody is really measuring or paying for.
Okay. Yeah.
Question 3 is yes, definitely, and number 4, we are still thinking about it.
Okay. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. You keep the results from the group.
And okay,
you.
please.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so number 1,
Thank
nutrients, water renovation, energy, biodiversity, and tourism. For number 2, human people with pollution, plastics, over-exploration, H&S, and deep sea mining. Number 3, yes, it's a way to collect data, and it will be useful to see year-over-year changes. Number 4, I don't know, reliability and simplicity when using and reading results.
Oh, great.
Good, very
That's
good.
A good one.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now,
No.
Chris,
Okay, that's good.
there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Obrigada.
Now, have you finished, my dears?
We're still thinking about it a little bit, but we can tell.
Okay.
First, food, pharmacy, plastic material, deep sea mining, and need my glasses, sorry. The second one, waste, pollution, noise, recreation, and CO2. The third one, yes, definitely. The 4, help to control and monitoring the ocean exploitation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I take this one?
Eu recolho, vai vir para outro grupo. Thank you so
And
much.
now the last group.
Thank you. You want
Good
to
morning, everyone. So regarding ecosystem services, we have the nutrients recirculation, primary production, the composition of organic matter, genetic pool for future discoveries, and climate regulation. And regarding the stressors, which is the acidification, deep sea mining, pollution, destructive fishing, and global warming. And regarding the importance of the numerical tools, of course, we say yes. And regarding the characteristics of these numerical tools, we think that it's the possibility of aggregation and correlating a large amount of data. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we would like to thank you all for participating in
Yes,
our
thank you.
workshop. Thank you very much.
And hope that you see the deep sea and the numerical tools as the future, and you care about the deep sea as I care, because it's really important. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Obrigada.
Perfeito! Sério!
Sim, não, mas não.